it's very interesting, man, because the state of thought, if your attention is constantly on the punishment, you will never be able to see the reward. Do you know what I mean? So definitely the one, if your attention is always on the punishment, it's somehow the idea of a punishment is there in your judgment, you're never seeing the reward. You're never in a state of being to know that you deserve it. If it's more real for you to suffer, you will go towards going an experience of continuously suffering. But if it's also real for you to also be free, you will also go to an experience of free. Do you know what I mean? Do you kind of know what I mean with this? Let me see what I can. I'm gonna simplify it so I'm like that even like ants can understand. You know? Okay. We as a person have this sense of. Just give me a second. You think of freedom at first. You think about it. It's an idea which feels open to you. So when you think about freedom, you have a sense of openness that you immediately on some level know that you don't have. So we are acknowledging suffering. The Buddha, the story of the Buddha, you know the Buddha? He was a prince who his dad was knew he was going to become some spiritual guy. So the dad kept him closed in a castle as a prince with women and everything. And he never saw death. He never saw age. So when he left the castle, he began seeing suffering. And he saw that people are dying, people are aging. All this stuff is happening. Regardless, and he saw also the fruit on the ground, which the tree had, was inspired to give, also fell down. So our acts and everything is going through cyclical action, right? So this became real for him. So he saw that the state of his mind should be one that wants to go beyond the state of suffering. He saw as a human being, how can I have a greater experience of my humanity, of my life, right? So bro, at the end of all his travels, he goes through a lot of journeys. He comes down, he says, I can't figure it out, so I'm going to sit by this tree. And I'm not going to move until I figure it out. And he sits there. And so he's been constantly in this flow of searching, trying to find the method, trying to find the answer, trying to find the truth, trying to see where everything is going, you know. He can't find it until he stops. And when he stops and sits by this tree, for the first time his mind begins to absorb things from being still. So it's like God, he could never, it's like having the confusion of the river, of the water, but suddenly finding the wisdom of the stone. The stone is still. It sees where everything is going, but it is not at first there, do you know? So then you kind of see that in your mind you are acknowledging shapes and space and time. Okay? And so these immediate ideas and the immediate images you have from these come from your childhood, come from your memory, come from the first things you were told. So you need to have an excitement in you to want to search more than your memory to see who you are. So you want to sit down and in stillness be aware of all these thoughts, all these movements, all these identities, all these senses of self, all these geometry that is constantly changing. So what do you call changing geometry? And that's the question, right? And so some men in the Himalayas who stopped and sat down like the Buddha, do you know? They found a meaning, they called it sacred. And sacred meant you don't touch it. Man's touch is not there. Similar to how the Prophet said, it's not, your touch can never touch the untouched. Do you know? Because the concept of man needs to exist in some level of separation, some level of good and bad. But the awareness of man, which we call the greatness of spirit, is able to observe beyond man. So, if you want to experience your greatest concept of spirituality, you stop and you look at where you are immediately and you see that how you're acknowledging where you are is being done by more of your attention, more of your memory, more of your looking at where you are exactly. So when you're immediately here, the answer is also here to any question you had. So the Buddha understood this, and the tree behind him suddenly was the wisest thing, and the stone that didn't move, everything that was not searching, became the greatest treasure of the search. And when this happened, bro, he opened his eyes and he saw that what we call an enlightened being is one who has observed that the being is projected from the mind, and the mind is a natural existence within the moment. Your breath holds as much wisdom in regards to a moment of experience as much as stars, bro, bursting outside. So after you observe your concept of space and time, you're able to experience a greater creative spectrum of space and time, right? So you see, when you're having fun, when you're doing those actions, you see time has flown off. Because the way you're keeping track of time is linear. It's like me holding suddenly a lot of stuff in my hands, a lot of books, and suddenly when I want to play, putting it down and then picking it up, I'm wondering what happened in that time. You know? Your greatest action is to explore how you can bring your greatest action, right? You do that, that is the like. When you say you need to search what you like, you need to search through the most complex views of your ideas by first acknowledging the most simple. You need to go to the core of the core. You need to see the metaphor of the metaphor. You need to see where the light of every word in the Quran is coming up. So what one word in the Quran covers all words, which once you say it is like everything, right? And in that moment when you say it, you are also part of that everything. So you experience your omniscience. You experience your God presence. Do you know?